folks, and welcome back to episode 10 of Nautical Tales, the series where I highlight some of your best World of Warships moments. The very first highlight this episode comes from Sidian42, who's in Nagato, and at this particular time is busy engaging the enemy Fuuuuuussiiionnn-HA. However, the enemy Fuuuuuussiiionnn-HA ducks behind that island and disappears, so Sidian immediately decides to give chase. And taking a quick look at the map, there are no enemy vessels, so Sidian feels quite comfortable just sticking close to this island, head north, and try to cut off that Fuuuuuussiiionnn-HA. Suddenly, a wild Hatsuharu appears, but Sidian is so close to the island that the Hatsuharu practically runs straight into him. Yep, Hatsuharu basically suicided onto Sidian's Nagato, granting Sidian a diehard medal. The Fuuuuuussiiionnn-HA reappears and is engaged by Sidian's secondaries, and the Nagato secondaries are fantastic. And soon, the Fuuuuuussiiionnn-HA goes down under a barrage of shells, and that's kill number 2. So, was the Hatsuharu's actions on purpose, or was that a complete mistake? Was it a misplay? Well, we'll find out, because the Hatsuharu is about to get on chat to explain what happened. He was on the phone. Remember, folks, distracted sailing kills. Anyways, on to our next highlight from Captain Duty, who's in a Warspite at the very start of the battle, sends up the scout, sees an enemy Königsberg heading towards him, decides to fire the front 2 guns of the Warspite. That's only 4 shells in total, hoping for some good hits, and then RNGesus blessed thee. 2 citadels and first blood within the first minute and 15 seconds of the battle. Good shooting, Captain Duty. Next up is a fantastic replay from 122mm. What had happened was that 122 had disconnected from the game, and by the time he managed to get back into the battle, there were 3 enemy destroyers around him. So as he frantically tries to dodge the incoming enemy torpedoes and get his own torpedoes off, manages to sink one destroyer with torpedoes, manages to hit the other destroyer with the torpedo. With very little HP, 122 goes to the ram, secures himself a double strike medal. But this little clip isn't actually over, because that other destroyer that 122 managed to hit, well, that destroyer had burned its repair kit, and so that destroyer slowly but certainly floods to death. Which means the 122, in practically no time at all, secured 3 kills after making it back from a disconnect. Holy smokes, good job. Next up is one of my replays. I was in a Sims, feeling pretty confident engaging enemy DDs, and thinking that if they're torpedoes, I should be able to dodge them. I see an enemy torpedo warning, I look, I think there's a lot of space, until my own Tirpitz runs into me and starts to push me, and nearly pushes me straight into the enemy torpedo. Holy crap. I nearly shot myself there, and that Tirpitz, not a clue that he nearly killed his own team's destroyer. Next replay comes from Object 999. Now we all know the Tirpitz is one tough ship. Well, how tough is the Tirpitz, you ask? Well, let's take a look here. This Tirpitz is going to run straight into a Montana, a Yamato, and a New Orleans. And what happens next is awesome. Object 999 here runs in, opens fire on the Yamato, but with the Yamato's armor being that thick and being somewhat angled, shots mostly didn't do anything. So Object decides to go for the Tirpitz's awesome secret but not so secret weapon at close range, the torpedoes. He gets off 4 torpedoes, the Yamato realizes what's happening and tries to start dodging them. Now, Object 999 is taking fire from both sides. On one side from the battleship Yamato and the other side from the Montana. Manages to swing that ship around, gets off some torpedoes against the Montana, and then turns his attention right back to the Yamato. This Yamato, which had been flooded earlier, is taking secondary fire from the Tirpitz, and the Tirpitz's secondary guns are not actually that bad. Object 999 gets his guns around, gets them locked onto target, and gets the faster reload. Good salvo out, 2 citadels doing a ton more damage. And Object 999 started this engagement having done only like 8,000 damage, and in this super short period of time, Object 999 is going to pick up like an additional 90,000 damage, plus damage from secondaries, fire, and flooding. Finally, the Montana does land a really big salvo, wiping out a whole chunk of Object 999's HP, but the secondary guns that cause fire on the Yamato does mean that Object 999 bags that Yamato after he dies. Wow, holy crap, the Tirpitz is one tanky ship. From super tanky ships to basically the weak underbelly of ships, we have to look at Tyridian 89's replay, and Tyridian's in a Nuremberg. Not gonna have an easy fight against an enemy Nuremberg unless, of course, this happens. The enemy New Mexico runs the Nuremberg over, flips the ship onto its side, exposing that super soft, weak underbelly, and of course Tyridian takes full advantage of that and pops in numerous citadels into the enemy Nuremberg, and by salvo number 3, enemy Nuremberg is dead. Good shooting, Tyridian, and yeah, awesome to actually catch that on tape because you don't see that often. Our next replay comes from Xenon16113. And before I get to it, let me ask you all a question. What's red, yellow, and green? If you said a traffic light, you would be correct if I was talking about a real life context, but I'm not. I'm talking about World of Warships. And if you're not sure, well, just wait and find out. So, Xenon here has run into an enemy Miyoko and an enemy Omaha, and does the smart thing, decides to angle against the Miyoko and tries to quickly finish off the Omaha using armor piercing. And since the Omaha's armor isn't as good, it should be an easier task. However, the first salvo goes a little high and Xenon doesn't get the shot that he needs to get the citadels. And very soon after, the Miyoko and Xenon get really close. And of course, Xenon knows if the Miyoko is able to get torpedoes off, the Miyoko is going to be able to kill him. So, Xenon decides, heck with it, I'm going to go for the ram. And remember that question earlier, check out the chat window. First blood to the enemy cruiser, because he rammed, essentially, Xenon. Xenon got first blood as well, and another ship on Xenon's team got first blood as well. So if you can pull off this crazy combination, you'll know what's red, yellow, and green in World of Warships. This next clip, sent in by ledgeri, reminds me a lot of Dragon Ball Z, World of Warships edition. And it has to do with the concept of fusion. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you might want to look it up. Anyway, so ledgeri is sailing his destroyer around, and the friendly Wakatake runs into him because ledgeri was a derp and decided to sail in front of the ship. Except, by being a derp, the Wakatake and ledgeri kind of fuse their ships together into this unholy combination of a Russian destroyer and a Japanese destroyer. And unfortunately, for the next couple of minutes, they're unable to separate. It is really a lot like Dragon Ball Z Fusion, where once you get into a form, you're stuck in it for half an hour. Thank God this wasn't going to be half an hour, but it's still a couple minutes, which in World of Warships sense is like half an hour. Anyways, there are some positives to this interesting fusion. They gain double the torpedoes and double the guns. But sadly, because they messed up on the fusion, what they created was an abomination. Something that is absolutely ineffective in combat. Namely because they just can't go anywhere that they want. So this poor Wakatake is just basically trying its best to try to get some damage somewhere by firing torpedoes off into the distance and hoping that something is stupid enough to run into it. ledgeri also tries to fire off the Russian destroyer torpedoes, kind of in vain because the Russian torpedoes just don't really have all that much range, but he's trying. Can't really use his guns all too much because he's afraid that he might hit the actual Wakatake because friendly fire can happen. Enemy carrier sees this abomination in the middle and says, well, let me just come and put you out of your misery, and drops a bunch of torpedoes. And it's at this time ledgeri goes, hold on a minute, I know what I'm going to do with this Wakatake. I'm going to turn him into a shield. And that poor Wakatake can't do anything to avoid the torpedoes, eats one for ledgeri, and ledgeri's like, success, yes. Not only that though, oh yeah, speaking of which, not just the extra bonuses to guns and torpedoes, there's also like bonus smoke charges too, right? So it's not that bad, the fusion. I mean, You know, you have a shield built in, can absorb some torpedoes for you, act as a target for other ships. It's not a bad thing. Although right now you're all like, wait, aside from the fact that this was a fusion, how else is this related to Dragon Ball? Well, if you guys remember anything about Dragon Ball Z, when the characters in it fuse in a way that's not successful, they all turn into like a really fat, useless versions of their like fused self. And that's exactly what this becomes. It's just completely a useless thing, and it's gonna exist for a short period of time until some magical property in World of Warships decides, alright, I've tortured you guys enough with this failed fusion form, let's release your ships. And you'll see that like they don't do anything different when they're releasing their ships, it just kind of happens. So as ledgeri turns his ship around, something starts to budge, but like I'm not even sure what starts to budge, and then all of a sudden there's like a wobble, and then next thing you know, boop, the walkie-talkie unfuses and they separate into two separate ships. Fun. I think I should try this more often with my ships. Maybe I could do that in a carrier. Then I'll have like a permanent shield against enemy torpedo bombers. Thank you, ledgeri. Next up is a replay from Minami Kotori, and if this doesn't make you say holy crapu, well, you let me know what does. Minami is in a Nicholas and runs into an enemy Mahan. Minami immediately goes for the torpedoes, sends off two really nice salvos against the Mahan, but the Mahan manages to get torpedoes off first. And watch this. Look at that. Minami is gonna find that like a millimeter of space between two torpedoes and is going to slide the Nicholas through it. Holy crap, Minami. My god. And not only does Minami manage to slip through, manages to torp the enemy Mahan and gets a kill from that. Wow, what a dodge. That is absolutely legendary. And of course, our last replay of the week comes from Verdius, who's in a Tirpitz. And Verdius sees an enemy Pensacola at approximately 21 kilometers, finds the pointer, and decides to fire off a salvo. And the shells begin to travel, and the Pensacola blinks in and blinks out a little bit. Pensacola could have been turning, who knows? Nobody knows what the Pensacola is doing, but bam, 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 3 citadels. First kill, devastating strike. Nice shooting, Verdius. And watch the chat. The chat's where things get fun. Verdius goes, holy carp. Yep. This entire episode is summed up by that particular phrase. Holy carp. Not only that though, but take a look at the enemy team. 3 different people on the enemy team say something in reaction to that amazing shot. But Verdius' own team doesn't say anything at all. Nice shooting, Verdius, and thank you for sending in that replay. And on this Nautical Tales episode, there is one other thing. I was streaming this weekend, you know, playing my Montana, and all of a sudden, an alert popped up, and I wanted to, like, remember this forever because the mighty Jingles subscribed to me on Twitch. I went like total fanboy mode then. Anyways, Jingles, really appreciate it. I don't know if you ever watched Nautical Tales, but I really appreciate the support. If you do happen to ever see this, please leave a comment in the comment section below. Well, that's all, folks, for this episode of Nautical Tales. Hope you enjoyed some of those Carp moments that happened in this episode. If you like what I'm doing, don't forget to like and sub. Aside from all that, have a great one, and I'll see you all on the high seas.